When the future collapsed around us, we reached back into the oldest shadows of our past, and discovered that the weapons we once abandoned were the only reason we survived in the silent cradle of a forgotten dawn, when the world fell thinner and the horizon trembled with secrets we never meant to uncover. Humanity stood before a truth older than the dust beneath our feet, a truth that waited patiently through the rise and fall of empires and through the quiet breath of centuries, and when it finally returned, it did not ask for permission. It simply arrived, bending the sky with its presence, and threading the air with the cold whisper of something ancient and aware. It began on a night when the stars flickered like wounded lanterns, as though the heavens themselves were losing strength, and somewhere beyond the rim of the atmosphere a ripple of shifting light unfurled a shape that did not belong to any age we knew, drifting across the void with a calm, predatory grace. And when it touched the edge of our world, everything changed, because everything remembered. Our defenses shattered like mist before a storm. Modern weapons screamed, but their voices were too small, too young, too soft to touch the intruding force that moved with the certainty of something that had defeated countless civilizations long before our histories even learned how to speak. And in those first moments of fear, when the ground trembled and the sky peeled like breaking glass, humanity discovered something that should never have been real, something we buried not just in the earth but in our memory, as if hiding it from ourselves would save us from the truth of what we once were. The first blasts fell upon the cities, leaving trails of light that cut through the night like blades forged from the void, and the world shook beneath them, buildings rippling like cloth in a storm, hearts racing with a terror that felt older than language, and everywhere people ran whispering prayers to gods who might not have survived long enough to answer. But beneath the chaos, beneath the weight of the falling skies, a quiet realization stirred, an echo awakened. Deep in the mountains, where the oldest stones still held the warmth of forgotten hands, hidden vaults long sealed against time began to breathe, the locks stirring, the earth humming with recognition, as if something within sensed the return of an enemy it once knew well, and a soft glow spilled into the darkness, revealing shapes carved from metals that had no place in the modern world, weapons built not by machines, but by minds that lived before the memory of humanity began to fray, minds that understood the threat better than we ever could. These ancient weapons were older than written history, older than the carvings on the walls of forgotten temples, older even than the myths that whispered about the first dawn and the war that came before creation, the war that shaped the silence between the stars. And though we had buried them in fear, we now stood in need of them, because our future was collapsing, and only our past knew how to answer. Soldiers and scientists journeyed into the depths of those mountain vaults, their footsteps echoing through corridors that curved like the ribs of colossal beasts, and when they touched the ancient metal it awakened with a pulse like a heartbeat, slow, steady, patient, as if it had been waiting for their hands specifically, as if it remembered them across thousands of years and welcomed them home. The weapons did not look like anything that belonged to the world we knew. They shimmered with a quiet internal light, soft like moonlit water, yet strong enough to make the air tremble. And when the first warrior lifted one, the glow crawled up their arm like a living thing, binding to the rhythm of their pulse, and the vault itself responded, layers of stone shifting, opening further, as if inviting humanity to reclaim everything it once abandoned. Outside the vaults, the invaders advanced, their ships gliding through the atmosphere like blades slicing through water, each one casting shadows that swallowed entire districts, and their energy beams fell with merciless precision, tearing through steel and soil with a single breath, the world groaning beneath the weight of extinction, creeping closer and closer. But then the first ancient weapon awakened fully, and the earth itself seemed to hold its breath, because when the warrior stepped onto the battlefield, the sky brightened with a silent surge of power unlike anything our modern era had ever seen, their silhouette outlined by a halo that pulsed like the heartbeat of a newborn star. and for the first time since the invasion began humanity felt the faint tremor of hope. Tremor of hope. The weapon sang as its energy unfurled, not as a scream, but as a low resonant hum, a sound that climbed through the air with the steady patience of a rising tide, and when it met the invader's beams the light did not shatter, it consumed, twisting the enemy fire into threads of silver that spiraled harmlessly across the sky and dissolved into glittering dust. The world watched from behind trembling walls and shattered windows, watched as the invincible force that had torn through continents finally hesitated, ships once moving with perfect predatory grace now stuttering, as if something unfamiliar, something terrifying was stirring within the fabric of reality itself, reminding them of a memory they had hoped would remain buried forever. Because they knew these weapons, they knew them too well, they had faced them once in an age beyond the reach of any living mind, and they had nearly fallen then millennia ago when humanity was something else, something older, something more dangerous, and though we had forgotten that version of ourselves, our enemies had not, and fear rippled through their ranks like a shadow spreading across a dying sun. More vaults opened across the world, each revealing fragments of a past so vast and powerful it dwarfed the complexity of anything humanity believed about itself. Warriors stepping forward with weapons that seemed to bond with them, as though recognizing echoes of ancestors hidden deep within their blood, and with every awakening the balance shifted inch by inch, beam by beam, breath by breath. The battles became stories in motion, living myths blazing across the sky, warriors cloaked in ancient light standing against ships that descended like thunder yet broke like glass when the old power met them, and though each step forward came with sacrifice, the world now stood on the edge not of extinction, but of resurgence, reclaiming a legacy that had waited patiently through eons of silence. As cities rebuilt their courage and the world stitched its scattered strength back together, humanity uncovered the truth behind the vaults, behind the weapons, behind the forgotten war. The ancestors who built them were not merely early humans, they were people who understood the language of the stars, not through technology, but through resonance, binding their spirits to the fabric of creation, using weapons not as tools of destruction but as conduits of will and identity and purpose. We were not weak because we forgot we were weak, because we thought remembering would destroy us, but when we finally opened our eyes to the truth, we discovered that our past was not a burden, it was a shield forged in an age when humanity stood tall enough to challenge threats carved from the bones of the universe itself. The final battle came beneath a sky swirling with fractured starlight, as the invaders gathered for one last strike, pouring their entire fleet into a single formation, a wall of shimmering metal and pulsing light stretching from horizon to horizon, and humanity stood before them, ancient weapons glowing in the hands of warriors who had finally remembered what they were always meant to be. The moment the fleets collided, the world ignited with brilliance, the air trembling, the oceans rippling, the mountains groaning under the force, and yet through that storm of collapsing light humanity pushed forward, weapon by weapon, heart by heart, until the final beam of ancient power cleaved through the enemy core, splitting it open like a chrysalis of night, and the sky burst into a cascade of fading sparks drifting gently like falling stars. Silence followed, deep and full and reverent silence, the kind that comes not from fear, but from the recognition of survival, and in that silence humanity stood beneath a sky reborn, whispering to itself that the ancient war had ended, not in defeat, not in surrender, but in remembrance. For our ancient weapons had returned, and with them our future was reclaimed, our identity restored, our story rewritten in the light of a truth we could no longer deny. We are the children of forgotten stars, and we have risen again.